Okay, so after I got out of the tub, I ended up feeling pukey at one point, and I thought that I was in transition. I remember asking for like a basin to throw up in, but nothing happened. I pretty much was in the transition because I was like a 7, and so I was getting kind of like excited and happy because I read that in lots of places that transition only usually lasts about a half an hour, but that was so not the case in my labor. And I also heard that transition contractions are much different than active labor contractions. So in my case, that wasn't true either. They were, I would say, about the same intensity. I don't know if that's because I was induced or because my labor was so long and I was just getting so used to the contractions. I'm not sure. Josh also didn't eat during the whole labor. He ate a few bites of the breakfast that I didn't have that morning, but otherwise he hadn't eaten all day, so people kept asking him, do you want to step out and eat? And he kept saying no. Right now, I would have said, I would want him to eat, but at that time, I'm really happy that he didn't leave me because I needed him so much. And if he had left during that time, I don't know how I would have handled it. So I'm really glad that he stayed and toughed it out and really labored along with me. So my doula says that later I took a bathroom break and a short walk around the room and the bed, and then I was back on the bed in hands and knees, and I remember after a contraction I said something like, oh, I think I peed. And so right away the midwife checked me to see if my water had broken, and it had, and it actually broke 1 to 2 hours previously to when I thought it had. And she said that the fluid showed traces of meconium. So then at that point I was just like, oh, peachy. Like, I remember that was like one of my lucid moments because I knew that the baby would be taken away and I wouldn't get skin to skin and we wouldn't start to breastfeed right away and all that stuff. So I didn't really let myself concentrate on that because I had to be really focused on laboring right now, and I couldn't focus on the fact that the baby had meconium and she would be taken away because I mentally couldn't handle that. I had to focus on what was happening now. So so at 4:35 I was finally at 8 to 9 centimeters, but honestly that didn't really mean anything because I didn't deliver until 12:55 a.m. the next day. I got into the tub again and I started to feel really pushy, and actually during the peak of a contraction my body would actually push a little bit. I couldn't help it, but it wasn't doing anything. I was just kind of wearing myself out. So about 6:15 I went back on the bed and she checked me again and I was 9.8, and she said the 0.8 was there was a small lip left on my cervix. And I asked her right away, can you push it back, because I heard that they are able to push it back sometimes, and she told me no, because that would hurt worse than your whole labor so far. So she wanted me to change positions to see if I would progress. So I got back on hands and knees, but I couldn't stay on in that position for very long at that point because it started to put a lot of pressure on my knees because I was getting really tired. And then at 7 o'clock I got a shift change and I got back the nurse that I had the night before. So it's nice to keep the same nurses throughout my whole labor. And the day nurse actually bet the night nurse when she was passing me off that I would deliver at 10:30, but she was wrong. So I was really sad to see her go because she was awesome, but she actually visited me the next morning in Mother Baby. She was just so great. 6:15 I was 9.8, but at 7:30 I was 9.9 in a +2 station. So she did agree to push away that last bit of lip when I was at 9.9. So with the next contraction, she tried to push it away while I pushed as hard as I could, and it actually didn't hurt at all. But it didn't take me to 10. And my doula made a note that when she was doing that and while I was pushing, I said something like, "Come on, 10." But it didn't work. And so I was starting to get really, really tired because I'd been in labor for so long at this point, and my contractions actually started to slow down. So I tried walking around the room, and I tried doing some high knee lifts and sitting backwards on the toilet. Also, at this point, they had pulled out the baby's warmer, so when I was walking around the room, I would walk by the warmer and I'd get really sad, and I remember saying like, "Oh, poor little baby," because they knew she'd be taken away and that they would suction her and all that stuff, so it was actually depressing. So we tried the breast pump again at 7, but then by 7:40 my contractions were pretty much stalled. So the midwife decided that I should rest for at least a half an hour and they would try to start Pitocin. because I kept feeling like I wanted to push, but if I had pushed, it wouldn't have done anything because my body wasn't ready to push. So I would just wear myself out even further. I was way out of it by now. So my doula took some awesome notes. 7:30 to 9:30, I rested and I kept saying no to Pitocin. I think I kept saying no because I was so terrified of the pain that Pitocin would bring, but I didn't realize that I was already at a 9.9. If there was more pain, there wouldn't be time for pain medications. So I just really delayed her coming by refusing the Pitocin. And actually the Pitocin didn't again change my pain at all because they started at a really low dose. So at 9:30 days, I finally said, okay, we'll start Pitocin. They had to do a new IV because that IV that I had when I came, I had them put it in my right hand up at the top here. But because I was in the tub so many times and I was submerged in water, it stopped working. So they ended up putting it in my left hand on the top, and it was painful. But that was fine. So they started fluids first, and then they started the Pitocin. They started the Pitocin at 2 millunits per minute, and then by the time she was born, it was up to 8 millunits per minute. So I began finally pushing. I was 10 at 10:22. They turned the lights off and they set a mirror up so I could see my progress. I really focused on pushing at my bottom and not at my birth canal, like I was having a bowel movement. And this was, I guess, the correct way because nobody ever told me to alter the way I was pushing. The midwife actually changed the checks twice, and I thought that's because I had a bowel movement, but my husband said it was actually because meconium was coming out. So that made me sad when he told me that. Her head, after like it seemed like forever, finally started to peek out, and at one point I felt like a tiny pop, and right away I was like, what was that? And the midwife said it was the rest of my water breaking. And then my husband was down. He was going to catch the baby, so he was gloved up and down at the end of the bed, and he kept saying, oh, she has hair, and the doulas were like, oh yeah, I can see hair, and I think that was supposed to make me excited, but at this point, I was like totally gone. I was so tired. It was just all I could do to keep pushing during contraction. And I forgot to say that I also pushed in a semi-reclining position. I had originally wanted to do like the squatting bar and the birth stool and all this stuff. The doula had said, do you want to try the squatting bar? But my body could not have physically taken that after being in labor for so long. So it was all I could do to do semi-reclining. And I actually didn't even hold my legs up. There was 4 people holding my legs up. It would be like Josh, a nurse, a doula, and my midwife, and then the other doula was at the end of the bed with the flashlight so I could see my progress. So I remember mentally telling myself to just let your body take over, remove yourself mentally from the situation, and I at one point tried to picture myself on my honeymoon reading on the beach, and that it worked for a little bit, but it didn't take away, like it didn't remove me from the situation like hypnobirthing or anything. And then I also kept remembering to remind myself of Anna Mae Gaskin's suggestion to let your inner monkey take over. So I did that several times. Like I said, I was out of it. I couldn't really talk. I could only like say one word or grunt. So my body just totally took over for my labor. It was kind of amazing. So my doulas were using wet washcloths to cool down my head and my chest. And at one point I remember one of the doulas putting a washcloth across my eyebrows. And I had actually had on my makeup since last Friday, from like Friday afternoon, and it was now Saturday night. And I remember moving it, like in the throes of pushing, moving the washcloth back up here because I didn't want my eyebrows to rub off during my labor. It's just amazing what, like, how vain I could have been during that time. But and at one point one of the doulas was like, oh, the ever glamorous Beatrice, and I remember getting a little bit peeved because I know I looked like a total hot mess, and I actually inserted a couple pictures, but yeah, it was bad. And they kept trying to make me drink during pushing. They had asked me all throughout the day to eat and drink, and I refused all throughout the day because my body was so focused on laboring. I barely drank any water. I didn't eat anything. I had like 3 bites of breakfast that morning. I was just, my body was in a, like, totally focused on pushing the baby out and couldn't process anything else. So, but during pushing, I actually started to request water more and more because of groaning and just the physical, like, exhaustion taking over. During pushing, they told me to finally reach down and feel her head, and I remember I was like, it's freaky because it felt weird. It felt soft, but it felt hard at the same time, and I felt really weird for that to be coming out. So then it started becoming hard to determine pushes from contractions. So I would push, and then, like, it felt like as soon as I stopped pushing, I put my legs down, and then my body would, like, tense up and be pushing her out for me. So it was really hard to tell when to push and when not to push. And I remember thinking, I want the midwife to hurry up and gown up, because if she gowns up, that means the baby will be here soon. But even when she did start gowning up, it was still, like, I don't know, a half hour later. During this whole time, I was still having the external monitor, and the nurse actually had to stand by the bedside the whole 2.5 hours I pushed and move the monitor down my body as the baby progressed. And it actually was really annoying and actually painful, because she would be pushing on my stomach when, in my uterus, when I would have a contraction. And at one point I was like, can you give me a break? And she was like, I can't because you're on the Pitocin. So that was kind of annoying. So then I finally started to get the ring of fire sensation. And when that happened, the midwife started to massage my lips around the baby's head, and she would use lube, you know, like lubricating jelly to do that. And it hurt so bad. It hurt worse than, like, the actual ring of fire. And I remember telling her, that hurts. And I've never, like, direct like that. Like, I've never really projected my feelings like that to someone. So I felt bad even as I was saying that in the middle of pushing my baby out. But I'm happy that she did it, because I actually didn't tear at all. Because I think I pushed for so long, because she massaged the tissue for as long as she did, I didn't tear at all. So even though it was extremely painful, I was happy. So then I finally started to get hungry, so I knew that this was, like, the delivery was almost over. So the nurses started to get really vocal, or the nurse and the midwife, and tell me, come on, you need to push, you need to give it your all with this next push. And they just kept saying that over and over again. So I actually started to get pissed off, because it felt like I was giving it my all with each push. So how could I can only give it my all so many times before I'm, you know, done. The last minute of pushing, there was actually, people started freaking out. They were yelling at me to give it my all. Things started to get really frantic, because the baby actually had shoulder dystocia. So they flipped me into the McRoberts maneuver position. The midwife was up on the bed pushing on the top of my uterus, and they were screaming for the call button to be pushed so that doctors could come in. So I'll actually insert a clip of that here. It's pretty graphic. It makes me cry every time I listen to it. So if you are scared of natural labor and the pushing stages, I don't know, skip this or something, because the way that I scream, it scares me. So I'm sorry.
Push. Push. Everything you got. Come on, Beatrice. Come on. Way back. Yep, that's it. Somebody call our son. Beatrice, big push. Push. Come on, big push. Everything you got. Push. Somebody's gonna call light. Call out. Push every Ardette. Beatrice, big push. Come on, push. Beatrice, call light. Push now. Hard as you can. Push. Everything you got. Come on. Push. Come on. May I help you? We need a doctor. All right, good job. Good job. Okay. You did it, bitch. She's out.
So they knew that she had this shoulder dystocia, because when her head came out, I didn't look at this point. Like, the mirror was still there, but I had my eyes shut, like, pushing so hard. When her head finally came out, it was only to her chin, and her neck didn't come out. So they couldn't see if the cord was wrapped or anything. The midwife couldn't get her hands on her neck to help turn her or anything. That's how they knew But when they flipped me into that position and the midwife started pushing on my top of my uterus, and I pushed as hard as I could, Flor came out, and like as soon as they said that we need doctors, Flor was out. It was crazy. So she was born at 12:55 a.m. After 36 hours of labor and 2.5 hours of pushing. So yeah, my husband didn't catch, obviously, because Flor had this shoulder dystocia. So she came out. I remember looking down right away. She was on the bed, and they cut the umbilical cord, so Josh didn't get to do that either, and then she was gone. Like, they took her over to the other side of the room to start suctioning her. Josh went over there with her right away. So they started suctioning her, and she didn't cry for like a really long time, actually. And when she finally did cry, like, I was laying on the bed, and like I broke into this huge grin, and then people were like, "Oh, there's a smile." But her Apgars were 5 and 8. And then we started finally telling people her name, and I kept asking my husband, what does she look like? What is she doing? Because he was like way on the other side of the room. But that's when I realized that there was something going on with me that I needed to focus on. So I started to bleed really heavily, and I kept asking my midwife, what is that feeling? What is that coming out? It was actually like blood clots. So she just started to really be intensely focused on what was going on, and she actually started to sweep my uterus, and she thought I had a tear on my cervix. So again, they had to press the call button to get an OB-GYN resident in, who also came in to check my cervix, and she actually did a speculum exam like minutes after I had just given birth, and that was extremely painful. So I would say the top 3 things that were painful were the stretching of the tissue while her head was crowning, when she actually came out, and then the speculum exam right after birth was absolutely horrific. The doula actually stayed with me and helped me breathe through that, because it was just terrible. And I told them first thing, I was like, you can give me pain medication now that the baby's out, because this pain has no purpose to me, so I'm like distance myself from it. And they gave me Nubain, but it really didn't do anything anyway. But it turns out I didn't have a tear on my cervix, and I didn't tear at all, so I was really happy. But that was like, oh, terrible. And then the placenta, she wanted me to try to push it out, but I was like physically done, so we had to wait a while for that. And I finally was able to do like the tiniest little push, and it came out. So then at this point, they brought Flor over to me as like all this was going on, so I was able to like mentally remove myself from that and focus on the baby. So I remember saying, oh, she's so cute. So I'll insert a clip of that here, because you can hear me saying that pretty well, and I'll put a picture too.
Oh, look it. Be careful. Oh, my goodness. Oh, hi. Oh, you are cute. I love you. Oh, hi.
So then Flor and Josh left. She had to go to a place called Transition, which it wasn't the NICU, but it was like to be observed to make sure she was fine from the meconium and all that stuff. And she was only there for about a half an hour, or for about an hour. So that wasn't bad. And right after she came back, we started to breastfeed and all that kind of stuff. After Josh and Flor had left, I started to feel really distant, so I just called my parents, and I called my mother-in-law and told them that the baby was here. And it was like 1 o'clock in the morning, but they were able to get me some food because I hadn't eaten, and I also started to drink a ton of fluids because I just was so hungry and so thirsty at that point. And then before they would discharge me from labor and delivery, I had to pee, so I was able to pee just a smidge, and then we were able to go. I gave the doulas and the midwife and the nurses the brownies, so they were really grateful. I was just really happy that I was able to have my unmedicated birth, even though I ended up being induced. So then we went to the mother-baby unit, and we ended up staying up until like 5 in the morning, talking and looking at the baby, and just like being new parents. So that is my labor and delivery story. Please let me know if you have any questions about induced labor, natural childbirth, being plus size and pregnant, having a doula, having a midwife, anything like that. I'll be happy to try to answer your questions. Here is the baby. she's sleeping. She's kind of cranky. She's 4 weeks today. So I know that was really long, so I appreciate you listening to my story. I always wanted to watch and hear and read stories of natural, successfully unmedicated labors when I was pregnant. So I hope my story helps some of you. And again, if you have any questions, just leave them below. Thanks for watching. Bye.